Morena and good morning. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana I ngā taki ki mua e o mātou aro. I pono ana mātou ke kaha, tonu ke te whakapau mahara haupaua mō ngā hapori I mahi ne mātou. Mi kaha hoki mātou kia toa ke whaihua ka tō tika ta mātou mahi e māti maia te tiro whakamoa me te hihiri ke taia te arahi e roto I te ko tahitanga me te aroha.
You can whakapapa your own link to the mountain. Can you explain where it links up to?
Personally, I grew up in Waikanai, so I whakapapa, and then also grew up in Te Horo, so I whakapapa more so to Otaki and the Tararuas.
Right. Item number 3, apologies. I know for lateness, Janet Holbrow and Councillor Hanford for lateness. Anybody else? No. I move that we accept apologies for lateness for Councillor Hanford and Janet Holbrow. Can I have a seconder? Jackie Elliott. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Item number 4, declaration of interest relating to items on the agenda. I've been notified of none. Public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. We have, I think, about 10. So be aware that you're given 3 minutes, and before your 3 minutes up, the buzzer will sound and you need to wind this up. Tanika.
Your Worship, I don't think they're actually here yet. I think they're ED strategy, and I think they've booked them from 10.
They start from 10.
So I can call Ainsley?
Yeah.
But the public won't be coming until at least 9:45.
Until 9:45. Okay. Anyone here in public submission time? Those people who are going to speak on the economic development side will speak at about 10 o'clock. Leave of absence? Any leave of absence? Yeah.
For use to Mayor, if I could request from Friday the 28th of August. No, sorry, Thursday. Yeah, Friday the 28th of August through to Wednesday the 2nd of September.
Okay. Anybody else? I move that the leave of absence be accepted. Can I have a second that? And the Barbara, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Matters of an urgent nature. None. You got the Mayor's report, the item number 6. No, item number 7. Any queries on that? Otherwise, can somebody move that you accept the Mayor's report? Moved by Councillor Compton and seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Pass. We now go into substantial item number 8 on reports. The first item is item 8.1, appointment of chair to the District Licensing Committee. Can I have Leanne and Janice?
I think Leanne may have thought it was going to be later.
Why?
Sorry, we thought the ED stuff was coming first.
Okay. Just a couple of minutes while we get the relevant staff officer here.
I don't know what's happened here. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. She's on her way down, so she'll be here. No, it's all good. It's all good. So it was booked from 10 because... Sorry for delaying.
Welcome, Leanne. So we're just juggling the agenda. Yeah, can I have your attention? Leanne, you want to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The paper before you today gives members two recommendations to choose from. This is a topic that has been discussed in a previous paper, and members asked for a new paper to be presented with additional information, particularly around the option of having a councillor as the DLC chair. What I would like to add, just one thing, in terms of the recommendations, should councillors choose to appoint a councillor as DLC chair, because the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act doesn't allow for carryover of work to the new chair, we'd be in the position, for instance, that the recent hearing in Otaki would have to be done again. So we'd suggest inclusion of an additional resolution that the current Commissioner has her term extended for 3 months from the date of the resolution to allow for completion of cases currently in play and for handover to the incoming chair. Nothing else to add. Happy to take any questions through. Thank you. Through the chair.
Questions? Councillor Compton and then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just in terms of that 3-month extension, just double checking the current chair is happy to do that.
In fairness, we haven't had a chat with her, but she's been extremely accommodating so far, and I honestly don't think there would be an issue with that.
I understand there's been a bit of a push more towards having independent commissioners, and I know that Councillor McCann has shown interest in this role. What is the risk in us having a councillor in that position rather than an independent person? I personally don't have an issue if the vote goes for Councillor McCann to be in that position today, but I think it would be helpful for us to understand if there are any risks in doing so before we proceed.
Thank you, Councillor. The paper does lay out the risks and pros and cons, in fairness to both options. In summary, an independent commissioner is potentially seen as independent. There is a risk for a councillor in terms of balancing both their responsibilities as a councillor representing the community and at the same time representing the DLC as chair. And those responsibilities are quite different. And so there is a potential for the perception that one of those responsibilities is outweighing the other. Again, that is a perception, and it would be something for that person to manage carefully. But that would be the primary, well, one of the primary issues. The other potentially is workload. It's not a small job when hearings arise, and there is a lot of work for the chair in terms of reporting after the meeting as well as at the hearing itself. So potentially for somebody who's a councillor working and also DLC chair, it could lead to a delay perhaps in the response to the hearing and the papers that need to be prepared.
Anybody else? Question time. Yeah, James.
Sorry, look, thank you for the response. I obviously had read the paper, but I think it, given the topic, it was important that we hear that again, and so that when we make a decision, we know that you know, the basis behind it and the pros and cons. I appreciate the response.
If there are no other questions, can I ask? No, that's I'm coming to you. Yeah, if there's a question, you can ask a question, but after that I'm going to ask, since you have put your hands up and we've got your CV here, we may want to ask you to respond to some of the issues that have been raised in terms of your own ability to meet the requirements of the role. You have a question now.
I do. Would you say that the same issues you've just raised could potentially also apply to an individual appointee who's independent?
The issues around workload could certainly apply to that person, which would be something that would need to be worked through during the recruitment process.
Councillor McCann, since you have put your hand up for this, and I know you have, would you like to see, you've read the report, you heard the question that was raised by Councillor Coates and the response by staff. Would you like to respond, state your case, if I may so boldly ask you?
Thank you, Mr. Beer, and thank you for the opportunity to address this. I have provided a very, very short CV, which just provides some background of the relevant experience, both legal, both in harm prevention with the use of alcohol, and also as someone who's held a licence and set up bars and worked in that industry, but also is removed enough from that particular career not to have any conflicts of interest. And also someone who works in this community across a great range of different areas. So I think my mother would be very proud if I was to take on a role that actually used my law degree. I'm very, very happy to answer any questions.
Your mother is not here. Yes. Right, any questions from anyone? No? Jenna Holbrook.
So, thank you. I'm sure you're highly qualified for the role. So, could you speak about the time issue, the availability, because that's something that's been raised, so it probably needs to be addressed.
I've addressed it in that short document. I believe that you can run a diary very effectively. The only thing that becomes hard is when your diary changes within a week. But I run our household by a diary, our cooking is by a diary, so that things don't actually drop off. I don't have any issue with being able to take on the workload, and I've spoken to the current chair, and I don't think it's overtly onerous. There can always be situations where there is something that is quite litigious, and that may require extra commitment, but I don't believe that I would be in a position not to be able to undertake even those difficult issues.
Anybody else? Here's your chance to grill. Councillor McCann. Councillor Coates.
Like I say, actually not a question, Mr. Mayor, so just check it. I want to say this time around, because it's the second time we've had this discussion, it's certainly more helpful having the paper supplied by Councillor McCann in terms of experience and addressing the time and commitment. So from my perspective, it's definitely easier making this decision when we've got a bit more information. So I just wanted to say thank you for providing that.
Anybody else? No? Otherwise, could somebody... And have we got a seconder? Councillor Elliott seconds it. Open for debate.
So we need to move the proposed additional recommendation to extend the current.
You want to move that also?
Yeah.
So it's 37A and 37B. Can you read that again?
Yes.
You put it.
That the current commissioner... Apologies. That the current commissioner has her term extended for 3 months from the date of this resolution to allow for completion of cases currently in play and for handover to the incoming chair.
Right, open for debate. Anybody? No? Councillor Quinn.
There we go. Yeah, I'd just like to say that obviously we've canvassed this issue a couple of times now to reach this point, and I think it's really important that someone from this table does take responsibility for that role as the district licensing chair. And I think the what Councillor McCann has put in front of us in terms of his experience and his background, I think would be invaluable to that role. He understands the industry, he understands a lot of the salient issues that are around it in terms of the impact it has on wider society, which I think is hugely valuable. And I would hate for us to disappoint his mother as well by not using his degree in law. I know my mother was quite glad when I got into politics and finally made use of that part of my degree. So, but I think, yeah, this is a hugely important thing, and I think Councillor McCann is a great individual to take up that role and give it the time and consideration that it requires. And obviously as a leader in our community, I think he's expertly placed as well to listen to people's concerns and those issues that will come up around these applications as well when they come to him too.
Councillor Holliday.
I'd just like to endorse Gwynn's views. Thank you very much for this, Rob, although I was aware already of your background and history in this. I think it's great that it's a district-wide councillor versus a ward councillor that's doing this role with regards to obligations, and I look forward to supporting any way I can as you move forward with this.
Councillor Holbrook.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I came in late, so I didn't have a chance to read this, and actually my question was answered in the last paragraph on this page. This is certainly useful and addresses any outstanding concerns that I might have had, and just say I'm here to support you as Deputy Chair. Thank you.
Now, have I got either Paraparma Ramadi or James Besbury?
Sorry, I'm a bit of a lack of movement, but just the only thing, just reading through the term of appointment, it looks like it's 5 years, so you're going to get a layover period between trienniums. So just that is one of the issues that you are going to face, is that it might assuming you're re-elected or not re-elected, that means you're going to have the continued participation of someone who's not representative of the council. So it's something that you need to think about.
Could I just clarify? At the end of the triennium, should a councillor be DLC chair, they would need to step down as DLC chair as councillor and be reappointed as DLC chair independent commissioner, but that could be complicated if they were standing again. So yes, it does introduce a level of complexity.
Thing that people need to be aware of. I've got no objection to Rob doing it. It's just that you're going to get a difficult period if there's successful and unsuccessful participants through democracy. And as long as everybody understands the other rules, there's no problem.
Right. Nobody else? Mr. McCann, the best practice according to Local Government New Zealand is actually to have an independent person. But given the support that you have around here and the fact that you are, given the CV, qualified, and the fact that opportunities for training has not been available because of the COVID, and given also that the recommendation 37B extends the period of the existing chair, you have some ability to actually sit in some of the hearings and beef yourself up, because I know it's a quasi-judicial role, and I've had cases before when local businesses have been very remiss when the decision making was delayed by a few months because of the existing chair's busyness, if you like. So that's a caveat, I suppose, in a sense, but I will support your appointment. Having said that, look, I'm going to put the recommendation. There's nobody else who's going to speak on this. Do you want to write a reply? Recommendation 37A and B, moved by Councillor Compton and seconded by Councillor Elliott, to appoint Councillor Rob McCann as chair of the District Licensing Committee. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Congratulations to your workload. We're down item number 8.2.
So we have the...
Oh, yes. I'm moving an item in the agenda 8.4, Kāpiti District. But we're having public speaking time on that matter. We have 10 speakers. Please keep to your 3 minutes, and before the 3 minutes up, the bell will ring and you need to wind your presentation up very quickly. The first speaker we have submitted is Bedi Larasi. Tēnā koe.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Bede, thank you. Good morning, councillors, and congratulations, Councillor McCann, on being the Minister of Beer and Wine. So the economic development strategy obviously has gone out to for comment. My submission, which I'm assuming everybody's had a chance to read, was brief. My purpose is, or our purpose is, the Raumati Village Business Association is not to sort of criticise the strategy, but simply to add to it. So there were two really sort of key points, and one was reading through the strategy seemed to us that there was a lot of talk about encouraging new business, new industry. We felt that perhaps we could have a little more explicit mention of existing businesses and how the strategy aims to support existing business. After all, what does it profit a district to gain the world but to lose its soul? But the second one, of course, was to do with what industries actually should be focused on. And I did notice that construction and retail were identified as the two worst affected industries coming out of COVID. I don't know the research. I'm assuming that the research is correct on that. But the focus really throughout the strategy has been on tourism and the creative industry, which were both quite heavily supported by central government coming out of COVID, whereas retail sector, if you look at central government, local government, every layer really has been left out. Even racing and GPs got more funding than retail. So I don't know what that looks like because of course, when the research tells me that there could be 250 jobs lost in retail coming out of COVID, I don't know what sectors, what areas, where those jobs are being lost. So not in a position to offer any solutions, but certainly the Love Local, Love Kāpiti type hashtags, the shop local strategies, all these things have been really effective. A word of warning, you all are probably seeing figures at the moment showing that retail has come out of COVID extremely strongly, okay, and that figures are really good. That is probably going to level off before long if it hasn't started already. So don't be fooled by a sudden burst. You're probably looking across the sector that for the first quarter of this financial year there's been a drop despite those kind of big surges across some months. So retail is going to suffer at some point. So really it's just a matter of making sure that there's a little bit of explicit kind of support around those areas. So, and I have to say the lack of pitchforks in this room is probably a sign of how well this has been kind of communicated throughout this process. So congratulations on the consultation.
Just hang on a moment. Questions? Councillor Buswell.
In speaking to the economic development strategy, and thanks for your feedback throughout the process as well, and we've certainly taken that on board. In terms of retail, as you know, I'm a retailer myself. Do you think that not only COVID's obviously having an impact on trade and forecasts and so forth, but in general, retail was changing before COVID? And I think that that's also a concern that we need to take on board, particularly around retailing, that there was a migration into more online sales rather than your bricks and mortar. And we need to really work out what our town centres will look like and feel, and what does that mean for going forward. So do you think that that's more of a focus in terms of our town centres and what that means now?
I think a lot of those questions come down to what you think is a range of worldviews when it comes to that. I think that's probably going to be extremely important coming up, and I think probably the sooner we start those conversations formally, the better, because yes, retail is going to change. I'm a fervent believer in the brick and mortar concept. We've been forced into online to some extent, but it's really kicking and screaming because we believe in the being in the community, contact with people, the engaging face to face, but we do have to face up to the reality. Yes, the digital world is changing things and will change things a lot more. But I think there's also an argument to say that despite COVID, there was going to be a global recession anyway. So how much of a recession is an economic cycle? How much is COVID? But whatever the cause is, it's happening. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Thank you for coming in, Bede. Obviously, Councillor Halliday and I have talked to you about this previously, but you touched a bit on it while you were speaking there about some of the initiatives that are going on to help promote retail. So what are some of the things you'd like to see come out of this economic development strategy to actually specifically help our existing businesses in Kāpiti, especially in that the sort of short to medium term to cover the recession as it impacts New Zealand and as the stimulus money from government starts to run out?
Obviously, more direct and explicit support for Raumere Village as an area would be very much appreciated. But again, more broadly, I think it depends where the pain points start to emerge. You know, I think it might be premature to be too specific about what help is needed where. But I think that, you know, if you look at some areas like Hawke's Bay, they were straight out of COVID, they were advertising have a vacation. These sort of areas were very quick to get their districts promoted and advertised. And Kāpiti, certainly Raumati Village, is way behind in that way. But I think Kāpiti itself generally is maybe in need of some district-wide promotion. So it's up to our jobs as businesses to do a good job then and kind of make people want to come and spend here. But I think if the council can sort of do the fishing for us on the national scale, that'd be appreciated, yeah.
Katie's fine.
No, it's not me.
Gwen's picked up my point, what I was actually going to raise there, but I think, you know, you actually asked the questions that I was looking for, so that's fine.
Hey, B. Thank you for coming in. And just building a little bit on what Gwen was saying and what you're saying there as well. One of the action points is a destination strategy with regards to coming to Kāpiti. You've recently started putting together a business association. So would you expect that a destination strategy would perhaps be a vehicle for the business association to perhaps work with council with regards to developing pathways, if you like?
Absolutely. As individual businesses and a business association, but certainly if there's a district-wide strategy to key into, then that makes a lot of things a lot more smoothly, especially once you're looking at sort of national advertising strategies. So yes, please.
And as part of our destination strategy, I dare say from an ongoing perspective, I would make an assumption that the economic development side of things will hopefully have ongoing community engagement. Would I be a fair comment to say the business association would be very keen to be a stakeholder in that space?
Yep. And I hope we're making that clear already, but definitely yes.
Right. Nobody else. Thank you, Mr. Arasi, for your submission. Much appreciated. The next person submitter is Linda Hill.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Linda Hill, taku ingoa. I'm making a point in greeting you in English because I see in the little summary of my submission that somebody has quite misconstrued what I have said and taken it to mean that I did not support the use of Māori language in the strategy. And I have asked that that be changed. And that document's probably too late, but I asked anyway. What I was objecting to in my submission was the idea of local government policy, decision-making and governance being passed over to an independent body. That is an unelected body. I think if there were, I was pleased to hear business association there. If people want to form chambers of commerce, business associations, and do their own thinking about economic development, that's really good. With whom the council should work in consultation and partnership, and equally I support, of course, consultation and partnership with local hapu and iwi. In fact, I'd support representation, Māori representation on all councils if I ever get the chance to do that. But I think I can't see why we would have put so much time and effort and money into local body elections last year if we're going to pass away that role onto so-called independent bodies. That's not what I voted for. So my second point is that it seems like the economic strategy is about growth and development based on developing businesses, increased population, and it is not giving attention to the costs and downsides and environmental impacts of that. And I think a good economic strategy these days should do that. I think we've had enough of growth for growth's sake, and we need to consider the impacts. And Kāpiti Council is actually going quite some way with its climate change policy and other measures. I mean, these impacts, a lot of the, I'm suggesting that the council take a look at the donut economic strategy as a conceptualisation for this kind of economic development policy, because it's been picked up around the world as a really good way of showing both the needs of the people and the impacts on the environment in a way that everybody can grasp. And on that outer perimeter of environmental, ecological impacts are a lot of the key roles of local governments. Cleaning up messes, dealing with waste, water supply, those kinds of things. On the inner one is the needs of the people. Some of those are also council direct responsibilities, and others are things we work with other people. So there are things like, if we had a big population increase, is there going to be enough places in schools? There certainly aren't enough places on GP lists. It's really hard to get on one.
Linda, you need to wind up your...
Okay. I was pleased to hear the last speaker speaking about a destination strategy, because that's what I would go for within that donut thing. That Kāpiti has always been a series of beach suburbs, and we've got gorgeous predator-free islands. We've got the new park coming on stream for the wetlands. That the strategy could be, so instead of increasing population and businesses here, one of our big assets is a city only 50 k's down the road that has the highest average income in the country, and we should get those people up here by train for events, for weekends and day trips, and then let them go home again, having taken a bit of money off them. So I was very pleased to catch the last speaker on that. The Arts Trail, the Film Festival up at Otaki. There's so much that we actually have that we could get behind without turning ourselves just into another live-in. So that's all.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Compton?
Thank you, Linda, for that. In terms of the concerns you raised around where this sits in terms of whether it should be an independent governance board or whether it should sit with councillors on it, we obviously have a range of different advisory boards that council has independent members on that we interact with. We've just obviously appointed Councillor McCann across to the District Licensing Committee based on a similar idea that we should have some sort of council representation on that. So would it help to address your concerns around that if one of the members of that governance board was an elected member?
No. And also, I mean, the short questions on the website are the short way of answering to this response. We simply a yes/no question. No, it is the council that should decide policy. It's the council that should oversee the operations of the council. And in consultation with other people, sure, that's why I'm here. But it's we elected people to make these decisions and to supervise these things and to implement these strategies. It's not for other people to decide what strategies while KCBC simply funds it. Because all of this stuff, in the end, comes down to decisions which may have impacts that are then externalised on ratepayers or next generations. So, yeah, it's council business.
Councillor Rob McCann.
Thank you, Linda. I'm just going to follow up on what Councillor Compton has said, and I know so that you're aware, we've had this discussion about whether we should farm out this responsibility, and I didn't agree with it at first, but I was talked around by a number of councillors regarding how this would work, and I wonder whether the fact that that organisation or that committee is going to be reporting back to councillors allays some of your concerns.
And submitting their ideas and in the same way as we are doing here today? Or partnership arrangement or something, but the decision making should lie with elected councillors. That's why we elected councillors.
Oh, do I? Again. Those are interesting things you raise, and I'm sure that they will be discussed later in the meeting, so thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Councillor Coates. Councillor Coates.
Good morning, Linda. Thank you for coming in this morning and sharing your thoughts on this and for your submission. Are you aware that the Council, for at least the last two trienniums, this one and the previous one, and possibly even before that, has had a lot of external pressure from the community for the independence of the ED work, both from the Chamber of Commerce and from KITA.
Well, they would. And in that case, I'm glad I'm here.
Would you agree that economic development or the ED strategy requires specific skill sets in terms of being able to do the, I mean, in any particular role, climate change, for example, not anyone is knowledgeable on all things sort of climate related, and the same with economic development.
Consultation is about, that's what staff is about. You actually have some quite good staff on climate change from...
Why I asked that question is, you know, the idea behind having an independent group is for people to have specific skill sets in that area that can work with the council. They don't set their own budgets. The council sets those budgets and they report back through to the council. So can you not see the benefit in having a group on any topic, and as Councillor Compton has given other examples, with those specific skill sets that are a lot more versed in that area than potentially, now I do think there are councillors around this table, this training, that have some ED background or skills, but that's not always guaranteed in elections.
It does not require expertise in every area, but as a group, they should be making decisions. That's why they're elected. I don't see that actually, particularly given this document, that having people with expertise in economic growth who are not considering the other responsibilities of council can actually get us forward in the direction we want to go. I think we've had economic advice for the last 40 years that has had impacts on the environment and impacts on adverse impacts on a lot of people. I'm over it. I would like or the actual decision making on details on the basis of a growth-based strategy. No.
Last question, Mr. Mayor. Have you not had the opportunity to address the very things that you've raised around impacts on the environment through the consultation process that are being heard today and potentially being adopted into the strategy, as has low carbon Kāpiti and many other submitters?
If you were to consider the donor economics conceptualisation, then those things could be all the rest of us. It is a strategy that actually considers the economics of the situation fully, both the pluses and the minuses. And a lot of those minuses are responsibilities of local government. And perhaps other people on the council have the expertise on those who are not sitting at the table if it's fobbed off to a so-called independent unelected body. Sorry, I'm getting a bit animated here.
You're quite welcome. We are all very animated people here. I think the next, James, you finish with that one. So, Councillor Baswa, unless you've got some fresh angle, you know that the submitter is pretty staunch in that area.
Absolutely, and thank you for coming in and joining us today and voicing your opinion as well as your written submission. In terms of the independent governance body, it really just looks after and guides the strategy through its process over its time frame. So in terms of making any decisions, the governance body doesn't make the decisions. The elected members essentially make the decisions. And so the governance body is a team of expertise that will be pulled together for a period of time, and sometimes those governance people will actually change. And I understand your your worries in terms of the climate responsibility for local business, but in that independent group, there are to be 3 representatives from our local iwi that absolutely top of mind will be the environment and the well-being of local people. And so, do you?
The other impacts of business and population growth in the area, such as waste management and water supply. And
can I just remind you that ask the question and get an answer. And we don't want to go into a debating between the submitter and yourself. Just
out that the decision makers are still around this table. Any decision needs to come around this table. It's not the decisions of the independence governance group.
The word independence, I'm sorry, didn't say that to me. The explanation in the document did not say that to me. And the idea of only one councillor on that independent body doesn't say that to me. I'm glad to hear the iwi people are there. Yeah, right.
Councillor Hanford, then Councillor Elliott.
Kia ora, Linda. Just a specific question around the climate responsibility. What do you see needs to be strengthened or potentially added or incorporated to ensure we are reflecting our climate change, the need to respond to climate change, but also the donut economics model? I'm wondering if there's some specific things you can point to that might need to be incorporated, or an overarching kind of theme.
Kāpiti, and for the council, it would become clear what the overrun issues would be, and it is things like water pollution or coastal erosion or waste management, which is going to be a huge problem in the next few years, and our emissions and how we deal with the emissions, some of which we're just going through on the expressway. And we do have things happening like the wetland, which will help mediate those. I think the thing about that diagram is that you can do it for the region, you can do it specifically for council responsibilities, and then a lot of the ones on the inner circle of the needs of the people would of course be the various local groups and other government services that the council is working with. So, I mean, the climate change for the council is made up of various responsibilities, both regional and local. So I find it's a better conceptualisation because it's easily grasped by other people, whereas I find the document here is very much about growth and increase and how to do it, with the assumption that it's all good, has no other aspects that are core responsibilities of council, and those things, of course, are always, in the end, a cost on ratepayers and future generations. So, an economic strategy, development strategy, is really a sort of core direction for the way we go. And I really do support the idea of it being a Kāpiti as a destination for day trippers. We've got wonderful assets around, and I agree with the last speaker. Absolutely, I thought that was brilliant. Unfortunately, missed his name. I came a bit late. Oh, okay.
Councillor Hanford, you finished with your question? Councillor Elliott. Councillor Elliott.
Oh, Morena, Linda. Look, thank you for coming. You are a real breath of fresh air in your views, and I really do appreciate you being here and coming to speak today. And I'm quite in favour of what you're saying, and also have concerns about the social impacts of growth for growth's sake, especially when it comes to people who are on low wages and stuck there. And you gave us a reference to a particular economics model, and I'm wondering if you could give us that reference again, please.
Yeah, the idea is that a lot of cities are taking that up and using the concept to develop their own with our particular assets, our particular government core responsibilities, etc. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Linda. Right, the next is actually Rachel Barwell's submission, but it's been presented by proxy by Dr. Joy Anderton.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to hopefully add something to enrich the draft economic development strategy. I believe what I have to say is compatible with the 4 pillars, those wonderful pillars that you've chosen to rest this strategy upon. Somehow within economics we seem addicted to the notion of growth. The constant message is we must get the economy growing. We must grow our tourism industry, and so it goes on. And I think everyone around this table knows that our preoccupation with growth has had dire consequences. Firstly, the depletion and exhaustion of exhaustion of natural capital, all those raw materials that we just take for granted and we usually don't have to pay for, except Kāpiti has been very innovative in charging us for water. Thank you. Secondly, seemingly endless production that has fueled rampant consumption of goods. And of course, the third consequence is that mountains of waste accumulate at the end of the life of those products. Some people have thought that the market would regulate that and all would be well, but it hasn't happened, has it? We all know that unbridled growth has led to climate change, habitat loss, human poverty, increasing inequality, and so the list goes on, and we get very depressed about it, don't we? Our young people particularly get depressed about it. And adhering to growth is a bit like putting our foot on the accelerator when we know the tank's nearly empty. If we think we'll get there faster, we won't, will we? So, of course, it's brought some positives, this growth model. Longer life expectancy, more travel. Some of people of my generation were zooming around the world like it was no tomorrow. Better health and so on, but it's only been for some people and not for the planet. So if we can coax our brains off this adherence to the growth mindset, what are our options? And I think we need to be kind with each other because the addiction is very understandable. Our brains are hardwired to follow patterns, and we've followed this growth pattern for decades now, despite the dire consequences. But here is an opportunity, and an opportunity, as I say, for this council to make a big difference.
Joy, you need to wind up your solution.
Can I take my time, which was coming later now? Would that be all right? Thank you. So if we coax our minds off this growth model, what have we got? We can recognise that there are limits to growth and the use of natural capital. And what we can do is focus on the social, cultural, spiritual and environmental context of our economy and think, what will make Kāpiti thrive? A subtle but significant difference from growth. Let me give a few examples. They're pretty obvious to everyone, but the fishing industry, for example. We can catch fish and leave a breeding population and not catch the dolphins as well. In tourism, we can limit our numbers so that the very thing that people come to the Kāpiti Coast for, which is peace and quiet and beautiful wetlands and forests, aren't overrun so that you can't hear the birds for the clicking of cameras. They don't come for that, so we need to limit that. In industry, we could produce fewer but higher quality goods with a built-in recycling or reusage process. In farming and horticulture, we think regenerative. Replace short-term chemical use with natural processes which enhance the quality of the soil, the food quality, and surely the human happiness of those working on the land. So think, thrive, not grow, with sustainable limits for everyone in Kāpiti, its human population, its animals and its plants and rivers and lakes. Environment and the people together, not the one at the expense of the other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Rob McCann.
Kia ora, Doctor. I'm going to try and frame this in a question, but I would just want to, and while I work out how I'm going to do that, I'm going to say thank you very much for talking about that need for a balance. I know that there will be councillors who will be trying to ensure that it's not economic growth for growth's sake, and I'm also confident that the document has tried to convey that in various ways, that this is a modern and hopefully really, really well thought out structure and set of principles. But I think what you've had to say has been very valuable. I still haven't worked out a question. Was there anything else you didn't say?
How long have you got? No, I appreciate that the council has worked very hard on this, and that's why I thought how wonderful that those pillars are there and they're strong. But I suppose I was thinking a bit of a biblical image here about building a house on rock rather than sand, that sometimes the thing that we are most knowledgeable about is growth in terms of economy, isn't it? That's what we all... Is it? Am I right? Is that what we think about? No? Good. Well, I'm really pleased. The balance is... I suppose I just want to emphasise it because the word growth appears 15 times on that one page.
Councillor Compton, then Councillor Holiday.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anton. That's very, I think that's very helpful. Are you able to offer us some examples, and it doesn't have to be right now, you can circulate around us later, about where this approach to, I guess, economic development being done sustainably in a developed country is working, or, where, I guess, because a lot of this is newer thinking, where it is starting to work and showing promise?
Councillor, I certainly can do that. And Rachel, who was unfortunately unable to be here, she's done a lot of work on this, has got some really good links, which I'd be very happy to forward to you. Thank you.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you for coming in. Look, in my view, we already have growth and consumerism. It's here, and what we're trying to do is put a plan in place and a structure in place in some ways to deal with that, and also to give our community pathways to comment on that. And this is an evolving strategy as well. It's not set in stone. We've got certain things that we're working on to start with because they need to be addressed. And this is something I asked the previous respondent as well. Part of that process is going to be community engagement and ongoing community engagement. And if consultation was made available to you, would you participate?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Councillor Holbrook.
Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us so eloquently and meaningfully today. So we're just about to go into our long-term plan discussions. Do you think that these are principles and concepts that we should be bringing to that discussion as well?
I most certainly do. Yes, please.
I like the really good one question, one answer. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, I also want to say a huge thank you for coming in and speaking with us. I got a tiny little tear in my eye actually, and I felt like clapping at the end, so thank you so much for that. And as a young person, I know that our generation is pretty fearful about the impacts of this, but it feels awesome to know that there are allies and people like you who are looking out for us and who are really conscious of the impacts of this uncapped growth and of just that focus on growth. So the notion around thriving was really, really important and this is 100% an opportunity, so thank you for raising that as well. And I've been thinking a lot about what we want to leave behind, so I just wonder, this is kind of a question around, do you feel confident that the way that the strategy is written now and the way that it encompasses growth, is that something that you feel do you feel that will create the kind of situation of growth or of a thriving Kāpiti that we want to leave? Is that sustainable growth that you're talking about, or do you still feel like it's...
Worried. I'm worried because 40 years ago I was in a group called Sustainable Futures, and we developed scenarios for the future, ones that we didn't want and ones that we wanted. Sadly, we have got some that we said we didn't want, because 40 years ago people were talking about limits to growth. They were talking about all the dire consequences, and as a general rule, we didn't listen to them. So I am worried, Councillor. Yes, I'm worried. So I suppose I want to keep prodding, and I want all of us to keep prodding ourselves to get rid of this addiction, because I call it an addiction because it's lasted so long, despite the evidence. That's why I call it an addiction. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joy, for coming to speak. And I've been thinking very carefully about and really pushing the message around people learning and living their lockdown lessons. There were so many lessons that we learnt about non-consumerism and looking for our own quality of life. And I would really feel as though what you have, both you and Linda have been saying, is such a part of that. And I would really like for you, as we move into our LTP discussion starting in November and then going into next year, that you two be a really important part of our discussion and our learning. I would like to see you back here. I'd like to see emails from Rachel, but with these economic models coming in weekly to our email boxes, and I'm very happy that you're here today. So thank you. We're going to continue this journey.
Thank you. Councillor Pravna.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, for coming in today, and also for Linda speaking previously to that. So I'm the Environmental Wellbeing portfolio holder. One quick question, which is a big question. Do you think growth and environmental protection and wellbeing can work together, can live alongside each other?
We used to have debates whether sustainable growth was a contradiction in terms. I'm not against growth. I'm against control growth. I'm against growth that has limits. You know, like if you're in your garden, we don't just want growth. You know, sometimes your broccoli grow leaves and no broccoli. You know, you've got something wrong. You know, growth is not a bad thing. I don't want to give the impression that I'm against growth. I'm against growth that acknowledges all the impacts that contribute to that. The things that make it acceptable. You know, the awful thing that's happened this week is a friend of mine's gone to the doctor and been told she has a growth, because cancer is a growth out of control. And it's partly what's inspired me this morning to say, you know, this can be growth unbridled, can be a cancer in our community. So let's honour the people who are suffering with this horrible disease by not following it in the way we deal with our economy and our environment. So they have to hold together. You know, is it a thriving thing we're doing? Whatever we're doing, is it thriving? Are we thriving here, or are we just growing for its own sake? And there's a subtle difference, and I think we have to struggle to get around it. I'm getting long in the tooth now, and I've been struggling with it for a long time.
Thank you very much, and what a wonderful name, Dr. Joy. The next submitter is Alison Lash.
Kia ora tātou. On page 120 of your agenda, you'll find the summaries of submissions. The summary of my submission, I think, misrepresents some of the emphases of of what I was submitting on, and so I want to address that mostly today. I said in my submission that I had two major criticisms of the draft proposed strategy, and they were that climate change was not a major focus. At best, it was an afterthought or an also-ran, and also that the governance mechanism was not explained clearly enough, and I think that's been demonstrated this morning. I did pose some specific questions about the governance mechanism, and you can find them in my submission, and I think they still need answering because I think they lead to the kind of confusion that's been discussed this morning. However, my major concern about the strategy is with the lack of integrated climate change focus, and in that regard, the final document is no more reassuring than the draft was. So my submission criticisms still stand in that case, and they're not reflected in the summary, so I just wanted to go through them. The climate emergency declaration was not clear at the time, and nor has it been made clear since, what the declaration meant to the mayor, the councillors, or the senior management team at the council. But on the basis of the document, I would say it doesn't mean much. In the summary table in the strategy document, I presume that the summary is intended to showcase the critical elements of the strategy. We find a total of 2 actions relating to climate change: advocate for the electrification of rail to Ōtaki, and facilitate and support the development of a climate change strategy. We find 1 medium-term outcome, which is improved climate awareness across key industries and business, and 1 long-term outcome, which is reduction in emissions and increased climate resilience. Improving the resilience of Kāpiti's economy and environment to climate change impacts and transitioning to a low-carbon future could have been a prominent and unifying theme in this document, and I had expected just that in the light of the climate emergency declaration. But disappointingly, that's not the case. You can't have it both ways. Either you put transitioning to a carbon-free economy at the heart of your strategy and you use it as a filter for decision-making about support for key sectors, or you condemn your climate emergency declaration to the status of a pretty set of words and no more. Where is the evidence of climate change being treated as an emergency in this document? It wouldn't be hard to make transitioning to a fossil fuel-free future a major strand of the strategy. Actions and outcomes could easily be included under each of the PO and would provide coherence and strong links between all of them. I haven't got long to go here. Surely a commitment to addressing the climate change emergency must mean leveraging existing sectors into a transitioning phase, and where that's not possible, encouraging the phasing out of some activities and replacing them with others which are more adapted to the carbon-free future we need if we're to have a healthy economy at all in 30 years' time. We must not prop up industries that do not belong in a decarbonised economy. Priority should be given to businesses and sectors that will require skills that are likely to be needed in the decades ahead in a net zero, low energy and more resilient economy. It's disappointing to see no evidence of such creative and future-focused thinking in this refreshed EDS. And I say refreshed in inverted commas because I actually facilitated the process of writing the 2014 one, and I know what was in that 2014 thinking. There doesn't appear to be anything very much new. A medium-term outcome of improved climate awareness is simply not enough. And a long-term outcome of reduction in emissions and increased climate resilience is woefully under-ambitious. Those outcomes are necessary, but they're nowhere near sufficient in the face of the real existential threat of climate change. And that was the thrust of my submission, and I think it still stands in the face of the document that we now have as the final. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Holborough.
Yeah, thank you for your submission today. So we've got now the final strategy. You say your concerns haven't been addressed. Is there a way to address those, or with the existing strategy in your view, or is it a complete go back to the bottom and rebuild it again?
be nice if you had the luxury of being able to do that, but I suspect you don't. I think a lot will depend on the quality and the thinking that develops in the so-called independent board. There's in some ways there's no reason why you couldn't build in a unifying climate change focus and still implement this strategy. It's just that it's just not evident there. There's no evidence to me there of any driver, a climate change driver, in the strategy, and that's what I was expecting given the climate emergency declaration. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the independent board could do that, but they need to do it, as well as the point I'm making. It needs to be done, and the council needs to take a leadership role in it, because that's the council's most potent role in this circumstance.
Alison, are you aware that a separate lot of work been done in parallel in terms of the climate change strategy that's looking at the internal business of council itself?
Yes.
Admitting the fact that the external side is a bit much more difficult to manage given their national and global influences on those areas. So at some stage, I would see that the work of that strategy will feed into it's starting to, although you may say it's woolly, it's starting to appear, which didn't appear in the previous unrefreshed strategy. Are you aware of that link and the possibility of that being increased?
I'm aware that there's quite a lot of work being done in one part of council on climate change, and I know that there is an intention to work across council with it, but it's not evident in this document. That's my point. And if this is your set of instructions to your independent board that's going to drive the economic development of the rohe, then then it's just not there. I mean, they could pick it up, but if you don't apply the leadership role in it, if you don't fulfil that role as a council, then it's entirely likely that it won't be picked up. There's plenty of excuses in this document to ignore it. That's the point I'm making.
Alison, thank you for coming in this morning, and I'll start with a comment which will lead into a question. Obviously not only yourself but others have raised this issue around the climate declaration or emergency, and I thank you for bringing it up. I guess it's the beauty of consultation and feedback from submitters, because certainly I've taken it on board both through the written submissions and people coming in today. Ironically, you used the word filter, and we've had that discussion internally as councillors, and working with Councillor Hanford around the filter that goes across the work streams in council. And what we're hearing from you today is that's not evident in this document, so I take that on board. My question goes more towards the governance aspect of it. You raised it, but you ran out of time to, I guess, refer to it in your introduction. So just briefly, could you outline the concern around that? I think if I remember correctly, it's more about what isn't said in the document around the governance body.
I thought you might ask, so I turned it out. Okay, the questions that I asked was who selects and appoints the board members? That's apart from obviously the council representative and the iwi representatives. Iwi and council are the decision makers there. Who selects the others? That's not clear. It's sort of implied that it might be the board chair, but it's not actually entirely clear, and that's a critical question because the makeup of the board, obviously is critical to your outcomes. What terms will the board members serve, and what will be the mechanism for renewal or replacement of members? I mean, you could end up, if there's no mechanism, and I assume that there will be, but there's nothing in this document that reassures me that any of this has been thought about. Will the council representative be an elected member or an officer? That's a critical question, and it's not addressed. I mean, the assumption this morning was that it will be an elected member, but it doesn't say that. It says a representative. Who will approve the terms of reference to be negotiated with the board? I'm assuming it's council, but that's not obvious. In terms of accountability, who are the half-yearly and annual reports made to? Again, there's a sort of implication that it's to council, but it's not made explicit. Is the proposed entity a council-controlled organisation, in which case there are legal, there's a legal framework around it? If not, what is it? Some sort of floating little entity that has no legal status. And I was the chief executive of a council-controlled organisation, so I'm familiar with how that works. And there's a framework for it. And what is the relationship of the board to KIDA and the Chamber of Commerce? Will they have representatives on it? How does that work? None of that is explained in this document, and it's really, I think it's what sparks that sense of mistrust about. So who's controlling this? Where does it go? How do we, as a community, get input into it? Those were my concerns. Thank you for asking.
For the response.
Councillor Rob McCann.
Well, thank you very much for some of those very pointed questions, and I'd ask, with the leave of the Mayor, that you're able to provide a copy of those. I know we already have them, so they can be raised later in the meeting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's brought up some very valid points. I just wanted to make a point that your point around leadership in regards to around this table, and I think this piece of work's been a long time coming, and but as I stated before, it will be an ongoing document with regard, an ongoing strategy with regards to as it evolves. But I think you'll find there is it's going to be very important for this table to be keeping a very solid eye on that, and be taking these community suggestions forward. But again, you'll be happy to be a part of the consultation processes ongoing with regards to holding us to account with regards to how this evolves.
Right. Thank you very much, Alison, for your submission.
Thank you.
The next one is Barbara Harford from the Organic Farm, New Zealand.
Kia ora koutou. I am, I'll introduce myself, or my colleague as well. This is Lisa Buchan, who has Waikawa Blueberries, and she's part of our Organic Farm New Zealand organisation, and a grower. And that's quite critical to everything I'm going to say, because we're all producers and growers. We make food. Okay, well, my name's Barbara Harford Silas. I've been a resident of Kāpiti for 30 plus years, previously 20 in Paikakariki and 10 in Te Horo. I'm a director of Te Horo Harvest. I'm a certification manager for Southwest Organics and a board member of Organic Farm New Zealand, which is our parent body. I'm also a board member of Organics Aotearoa New Zealand, which is the peak body of organics in New Zealand, whose members include Hort New Zealand, Zespri, kiwi fruit growers, and organic beef, amongst others. So that's my introduction. So how much do you know about rural Kāpiti? Perhaps you know there are some dairy farms, lots of lifestyle blocks, some beaches and rivers. So there are activities like river rafting, bushwalks, fishing off the beaches. But what is the rural economy? We have big farms. There's 3 large dairy farms just near me. There are 2 large beef and deer farms, a substantial sheep farm, and many more. And there are smaller growers, and these range from 2 acres to 100 acres. Many are lifestyle blocks. We have orchards of apples, pears, avocados, olives, berry fruit, chestnuts, macadamia nuts, walnuts. We have market gardens, several substantial ones. We have nurseries for plants, flowers, grapevines for wine. We have honey production. We have chicken farms. There's 2 near us. So our rural sector is our food producer. Supermarkets aren't. They're retailers and importers. But you may have noticed how many markets we now have in Kāpiti, starting with Paikakariki, Paraparaumu, Waikanae, at least 2, Tihoro, and now Otaki. Then there are also food boxes from our growers, direct to customers across the region, i.e. beyond Kāpiti. With all of this output, we think it's critical that there is clear input into Kāpiti's economic development strategy by the rural sector. We are critical to current and future food security. And I would probably emphasise that from our organic perspective, we have a great deal to offer or contribute to climate change. And that's it. I'm open to questions.
Councillor Coates.
Good morning to you both, and thank you for coming in and submitting. Look, it's a very old document, but are you aware of a report that was done probably 10 or 15 years ago in the Otaki and Tihoro area around arable land? If not, I'd be quite keen to try and get you a copy through of that, because it talks to a lot of what you've raised both through your submission and this morning, just around the area of land available and the use of the land in future use. I just thought you might be interested in it. I can't remember the specific document, but I thought before I chase it down whether you've actually seen it yourselves.
I haven't, sorry. Yeah.
So just in terms of that though, are you raising that because you're suggesting that there's not enough land to contribute to economic growth, or?
Oh, no, look, certainly I wasn't suggesting that. I was just raising it in the sense that I thought you might be interested in reading the report. It is very outdated, and I don't think there's been a refresh done of it. I can't, to be honest, remember the specifics of the findings of the report, because as I said, it could even be 15 years ago. So it was just simply I thought you might be interested in, given the topic and the questions that you've raised.
I think it was a 2012 paper by Gail Ferguson.
So it was certainly by Gail.
The Greater Otaki Rural Economy.
Yeah, okay.
I think just in terms of the opportunity is very large, because Kāpiti seems to be missing out on the amazing growth that is happening across the horticultural industry in the rest of New Zealand. So, and the consequence of that is you're missing out on a brilliant future for young people. From the time I was 16, that's all I wanted to do. I really wanted to have an orchard and be a grower and live sustainably and, grow as much of my own food and contribute to the health and well-being of other people that I grew the food for, which is why we grow blueberries and olives. So I think, for young people too, particularly those with a bit of a science bent, you need to have a lot of skills to be a really good grower, and it's a fantastic opportunity for growth, and particularly with organic growth, one that doesn't destroy the sustainability characteristics of your land and your environment.
Councillor Buswell.
Thank you both for coming in today and sharing a little bit about your business and your passion. Throughout the process of the Economic Development Strategy refresh, we had many consultation opportunities. Did you participate, or were you called up by council staff or anything to come in? You didn't look out in the paper for any ads pertaining to that or anything like that?
No, the first contact we had was actually from Mayor Guru about 2 weeks ago.
Thank you for coming in today. I think, having the rural portfolio, I think you highlight in your submission a really crucial issue for Kāpiti, which is around the pressure on our soils here. And at this point, we don't really have the same national attention happening to protecting those like we're seeing up in Pukekohe at the moment, where that has been an absolute hotbed of an issue. I know from having worked in the sheep and beef sector, there's the same issues playing out there with competing land uses as well. So as part of this economic development strategy, would you like to see council take a much more proactive stance in terms of advocating with government to get greater protections on those productive soils?
Yes, I would definitely support that, yeah.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you for bringing the awareness of your sector, which is vitally important for our area. I'm curious, what is the body that for making an approach to you as an organisation or as a group, if you like, what is the body that the economic development team should be liaising with? You've already answered if they weren't already. Do you have a collector for a group that represents the sector?
We have a national organisation, but locally, we're Southwest Organics, which is the certification body. We have about 20-something growers as members of that for a start. And as I've mentioned, I'm in contact. I know lots of rural, I'm sort of surrounded by farmers and growers, and I know a lot of them now. And I'm quite happy to reach out, not just to organics, but beyond that. Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So I'm also a member of the Olive Association, which has a lot of members here in Kāpiti. And the Olive Association is a member of Horticulture New Zealand. So, and I think the missing representation here is also from Horticulture New Zealand. They are the body whose role it is to assist councils and territorial authorities to plan and assist development in their regions. So I think they would be very excited to hear from Kāpiti Council.
Right. Thank you very much for your submissions. Really good.
Sorry.
You got another question?
Yeah. As stated before, this is an evolving strategy. I think it's fantastic that you've come and presented to the group. And as part of that, this is what this is all about, putting a strategy and a plan around economic development so that we can capture these groups. Because one of the issues around here is developing clusters or sectors and then addressing them. You mentioned in your submission about wanting to submit or to be involved in the board. I don't know what the process is for that, but I'm assuming you'd like to be informed what that process is and make maybe someone to submit for a role in that. Would that be right?
That would be good. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you very much. The next submitter is Monique Leith. She's not here? Oh, she's zooming.